to be joined today by Jeremy Scahill, who is going to help us walk through all of this. We'll play some of Trump and Netanyahu's press conference from yesterday. We'll play some of Netanyahu's later kind of Hebrew language response to this, intended for the Israeli audience. Obviously, talk about some of the Palestinian reaction. But so, Jeremy, the overall deal, the way I would sketch it out is, in exchange for allowing in, food, medicine, and other, life-saving aid, the conflict, the fighting would stop. Hamas would release all hostages almost immediately. The Israelis would then release 1,700 captives. I believe people taken since October 7th who are held in administrative detention would release all women and children that Israel took since October 7th, would release up to 250 Palestinian lifers. And then there would be this board of peace chaired by Donald Trump and kind of run by Tony Blair, whose major patron is Larry Ellison of Oracle. They would kind of run this technocratic international board that would oversee redevelopment of Gaza, but Palestinians would not have to leave Gaza and allegedly could return if they did. And there's some vague notions toward the aspirations of a potential state down the road for Palestinians. It looked like in the earlier version, there was a promise that Netanyahu would not annex the West Bank. That seems to have been taken out. What am I missing from the kind of the top lines of what people should know about this offer?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's important to remember that while this is being promoted as the Trump plan, and Trump basically said it's one of the most important events in the course of human history. Yeah. And I mean, we could talk later about his completely erroneous digressions into the world of false history. But it's being portrayed by Trump and his people as like his peace plan. But the reality is that this is the product of a joint operation between the United States and Israel. Trump assigned his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who is deep into the world of business and investment in both Israel and in the Gulf countries. His own private investment firm is bankrolled to the tune of billions of dollars from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates. So you have Jared Kushner, who also was the architect of the so-called Abraham Accords that were unrolled during the first Trump administration. And then Steve Witkoff working closely with Ron Dermer, who is Netanyahu's political hitman and his lead political advisor. And he's been the point person in dealing with the so-called negotiations with the Palestinian resistance factions.
And Kushner was at the White House event yesterday.
And Kushner was there, Ron Dermer was there, Witkoff was there. And in fact, on multiple times, it was so bizarre. Trump was just talking directly to Ron Dermer, during the press conference, or it wasn't a press conference because they didn't take any questions, but during the joint appearance between Netanyahu and Trump. And, but what I'm getting at here is that they work this thing out with Israel. They then, as they did under Biden and under Trump, they push narratives to journalists like Barak Ravid of Axios, the former Israeli military guy who now works for CNN and Axios and often is the conveyor belt for some of these leaks. They push this idea that Netanyahu's very upset about this and Trump is sort of dragging him, kicking and screaming. But if you listen to how Netanyahu responded to his quote unquote acceptance of this deal, it's clear that Netanyahu feels like he's in a really great position right now, in part because they were able to get this Arab and Muslim country stamp of legitimacy on this thing. And so what you see, if we sort of look at this as like a tree, you see a bunch of ornaments on this tree that easily can just be knocked off that are concessions of a sort to Arab and Muslim countries. So you have this kind of nebulous language about potential future Palestinian self-determination and statehood. You have aid coming into Gaza in quantities and under the basic framework from the January 2025 agreement, and it would be largely run by the United Nations and the Red Crescent. And then it says international organizations that don't have direct ties to either party, which presumably would mean that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation would no longer be operating in Gaza. So in that sense, there are terms that Hamas had sort of said that it wanted related to aid. It also has language saying that Palestinians are not going to be forced out of Gaza, and that Palestinians who do leave Gaza will be allowed to return. And then there are other aspects to this, such as Israeli withdrawal. But when you then start to dig into the details, what you find is that there are all sorts of traps that are set here. And that's why I liken it to sort of ornaments on a tree, because you can just pluck them off, knock them off, what have you. On the issue of aid, what it says is that it's going to come in immediately upon the agreement being signed. But then when you read in the details, it says that there's going to be the deployment of an international and Arab force on the ground inside of Gaza. Now, a side point about this is like whether or not Netanyahu actually is going to agree to allow foreign Arab troops to deploy inside of Gaza. But let's just take it on the surface. What it says is that this international force is going to deploy, and they're going to take over the security responsibility in Gaza. Because remember, if Hamas is gone, this has been the governing authority for 2 decades in Gaza. That includes basic functions like the police. So they're saying that an international force is going to come in there, and that when they go into areas that are currently occupied by Israel, after Israel and Trump certify that there's been demilitarization and Hamas has been cleared from the area, then the Israelis are going to relinquish possession of those areas of Gaza to this international force, and that they're going to withdraw. And so they put together these maps for 3 phases of Israeli withdrawal. The first phase is a very small one where they pull back to lines that are still deep in Gaza in preparation for Hamas within 72 hours handing over all Israeli captives living and dead. Okay. But then the second phase of it says that Israel is going to withdraw to lines that are still deep in Gaza, and for instance, where they still are in full control of the Philadelphia corridor, and they will remain there until the standards are met that are set by Trump to verify that an international force is sort of in control. And we're looking at the map there right now. So, you have this initial yellow line where they're going to pull back to supposedly, in anticipation of the captives being released. And then that red line is really what matters. This is quite deep into Gaza's territory. And what they're saying is that there has to be this international force that's going to be taking over from the Israeli military, and that the Israelis are going to remain there. And then you have this shaded area with the lines that is the so-called buffer zone that is going to exist basically in perpetuity. And so, what the connection to aid, though, is they're saying if Hamas rejects this deal or delays the deal, they're only going to implement the plan, including the aid and reconstruction equipment, in areas that are controlled by the Israeli military or an international force. So what it means is that even though they say aid is going to flow in, they're linking it to the demilitarization, surrender, and disarmament of Hamas. So it's a poison pill that is embedded within this. And on that issue,
so if you're a Palestinian that lives in 90+%
Beit
of
Hanun
Palestinians
or
live
whatever,
in
yeah.
this over by the sea there, so they would not get aid until this whole process unfolds.
According to the agreement, that is what it says. It directly is linking this issue of Hamas being certified to be gone from areas, meaning any armed resistance, in order for them to function in those areas. So that presumably anticipates Hamas either rejecting this or Trump this morning said he's going to give Hamas 3 or 4 days to respond to this, and if they don't accept the deal, that he's going to let Israel do whatever it wants to do in Gaza, which Netanyahu also referenced in his appearance with Trump, and Trump said that they would do that. So it does seem to be that what they're saying is, yes, we're going to resume aid under the framework of the January ceasefire agreement, which would be 600 trucks a day, equipment to remove rubble, the rehabilitation of bakeries, clinics, etc. But then further down in it, it says that if Hamas doesn't accept this, they're only going to do it in areas where Israel is controlling it, which could create something similar to what we saw with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, where a couple thousand Palestinians have been killed seeking aid since they started functioning.